My name is Kevin Martin. I'm here with you with the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program in our studio at Claro. And I wanted to give you another weekly update that we have been doing. And I wanted to discuss some of the things that are current to the season that we're in. So we have just, as you can tell by the Christmas music on your radios, we have just wrapped up harvest. That's actually not bad considering how late we were this season. It's just that the Christmas music keeps getting earlier. So including grapes destined for wine, or at least Concord grapes destined for wine, which were very late last year, everything has wrapped up at all the major processors. I'm sure there are things kicking around for ice wine and late harvest, but that's more of an intentional thing that people do. So everything we want to get in as soon as we can, well before the first frost has happened. There were some fights with wind and some really mixed reports in terms of lost crop due to some of the adverse weather events. For the most part, harvest weather was very good, despite a couple of wind events. So we did see some reduced yield, but nothing that impacted total yields. Quality was very good. Average bricks across our region, and I think including the Finger Lakes, is right around 16.5, with around 70% of all loads coming in between 15.5 and 17.5. So we really did a good job or got lucky of avoiding some penalties and getting some premiums for higher bricks in certain markets. I think what that's going to mean is we should have a pretty busy time of growers really thinking about their business strategy going forward. So for the last few years, there really hasn't been enough available capital for a lot of growers to make a lot of strategic decisions. I know a lot of growers are behind, and part of those strategic decisions are probably going to be working through crop loans and trying to catch up on some of those things. But as we start to think about potentially actually paying income taxes, it's also time to start thinking about making those strategic investments in the business. What we've always said all along is one of the things that separates most growers in terms of their profitability is to continue to try to thread the needle between an overinvestment in capital and not investing enough. So we continue to see efficiency gains in newer harvesters, in automated machines that remove material other than grape, things that reduce labor costs like multi-row equipment. All of those efficiency gains are true. They just need to be done in a careful and calculated way to make sure that they are right-sized for your farm and they're timed in a way that doesn't mean you are getting rid of capital that has good useful life left, or capital that is cannot be efficiently sold or traded in. And basically what that boils down to is we are a very capital intensive business. We have more dollars invested in land and equipment than most other industries as a percentage of our gross and our net proceeds. That includes field crops, it includes corn, it includes a lot of different specialty crops. We come out on top. Particularly in terms of equipment relative to our gross revenue. So when we minimize that, as much as we can without increasing our labor costs, we do really well. So it is very important to think strategically about those investments. Probably one of the big things that's going to happen over the next few years is a continued shift towards bulk harvesting. Probably a good time to think about how that might work into your system. If you are delivering to the processors that are considering those upgrades in their processing facilities, the one thing I would encourage you to do is to really talk to some growers who have some experience with that equipment, and really make sure that you right size that investment for your operation. The idea of bulk, and the reason it makes sense, is because it reduces labor costs. And in reducing labor costs, the way it happens is you pick more tons per hour, you haul more tons per hour, and you do it with less people on the ground. So in doing so, if you have available time during harvest, you may actually be able to decrease the amount of equipment that you have harvesting grapes. A lot of times it's very common to run 3 bin trailers, to run 3 or 4 semi-truck trailers. There are always going to be farms that are large enough to justify that and more. But as our equipment gets more efficient and more expensive, it may make a lot more sense for you to consider running less semi-trailers in particular and bin trailers. So because these things work faster and they happen faster, you need less to keep the harvester moving. And we have an overabundance of harvesters in our region. We have, on average, harvesters that harvest about 100 acres of grapes per year. So that means, although harvest is a very busy time and feels like a very busy time, there are harvest operations that harvest 8 hours a day or less to complete their harvest. Or if they are harvesting longer days, maybe they finish everything in a week. So there's some room to minimize the capital costs of harvesting by taking a little longer to harvest. And as long as you don't have people on the ground that you're paying to do that, you can minimize your capital investment and you can minimize your labor costs as well. So I think thinking strategically about investments like that makes a lot of sense. And I think as we go forward, if you do want to be as profitable as you can be, it's going to take some risk on your part. So what some people say is, and it might be a bit of a cliche, is trust the process. So when you think you need to have 3 semi-trailers because you've had 3 semi-trailers for the last 45 years or 60 years, it may be that with enough communication with other growers, you can come to believe that it will actually work with less capital invested. And that's what I would encourage you to do as you continue to make these investments. I would not limit that analysis or thought process to bulk harvesting into gondolas and bins. It's just a good example of how it works. I think there's a lot of other areas as we consider investments because we've had high tonnage and high quality this year, and it looks like we're going to have prices that are well above our 5-year average. We may start to see some of these investments. So I'd encourage you to look critically at potentially when you're purchasing equipment that seems to be more expensive than it was in the past, when it is more efficient to purchase less of it, whether that's tractors or gondolas or semi-truck trailers. The other thing I wanted to touch on is how fortunate we are. Not necessarily related to how we're going to spend all this money that we've made, and I certainly don't want to take away from the fact that we've had a number of years of challenges, that current market trends continue to be complicated, and the positive harvest that a lot of people had is not affecting everyone, and a lot of this capital that becomes available through higher prices and yields and quality is going to be spent just on catching up. It is good that we did get as lucky as we did, that everything came together really well in terms of quality. I think people who very logically assume that there's a lot of risk going into our fall weather season, we're very pleased with the results. We made out very well in September. To average 16.5 bricks was not necessarily something I would have bet on. It also doesn't necessarily shock me. We've been fortunate with some of our falls weather in recent years, so it's not outside of the realm of possibility, but we're just all, I think, very glad that it happened, and now we can move forward and continue to position ourselves to be as successful as we can through what appears to hopefully be at least a couple of years of a modest market upswing. And if it's more than that, great. And if it's not, hopefully we're in a position to continue operating as efficiently as we can and as sustainably as we can. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us or to comment below. We'll see you next week.